Good Thursday afternoon to you. 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. The Browns continue training camp out at the Greenbrier in West Virginia. They will be back home Sunday. Will be the first day that is in Berea for training camp. A scary sight, though, today. During kickoff drills, 11-on-11 live kickoff drills, running back Dante Foreman injured. Took a hit to the head during the kickoff drill, had neck pain. He was taken by ambulance, then flown by helicopter to a hospital in Roanoke, Virginia. But good news, earlier this afternoon, word coming out of that hospital, and x-rays and scans were all clean. So they came back negative and clean. He will return to the team today, which is great news. So Dante Foreman, a little bit of a scare earlier today, but good and back with the team. Before that happened, Browns went through some 11-on-11 drills, working through, and Deshaun Watson finds Cedric Tillman here, pretty nice play. Also this time, he's going to find Elijah Moore. Again, 11-on-11, Watson looking pretty good. Jerry Jeudy did go through individual drills for the first time this year. No 11-on-11s, though, as there he hooks up with Watson. Watson with Amari Cooper. Might have been pass interference on Emerson, but no harm, no foul. This one is for some competition. The winner of this one causes the losing group to do 20 push-ups. Watson finds David Njoku, and the defense has to do push-ups there. Let's welcome in Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. Jeff, again, I know it's camp. I know it's not time to get crazy. Watson has looked pretty good so far through camp.
I did a show, a couple days ago, and one of the segments I did is "Don't be surprised if." And my thought process was, "Don't be surprised if the Browns' offense starts slow." You're going against one of the best defenses in the NFL last year. You retained almost every part of that defense. Coming back into the season for 2024, you have so much newness, new offensive coordinator, certainly some new talent on the offensive side of the ball, new positional coaches. There's a lot of newness, new offensive line coach. So I wasn't sure whether or not, there would be a lot of success early. So I think this is certainly promising to this point. That last rep, the one you talked about with the push-ups, I mean, we've seen David run that, and it's kind of like a power slant. Who covers that, though? I mean, how do you get that covered in the NFL? It is really difficult to do, because if it's a defensive back on him, your best advantage is to either try to hope you're going to slip your hand in there, or you're going to try to jar the ball loose, but you're giving up 35, 40 pounds. It's just really difficult to cover. The Cedric Tillman touchdown, I think you're starting to see the overall growth of a full wide receiver room now. You have Amari, and we all know the success he's had. Elijah Moore, obviously a nice year last year. Jerry Jeudy starting to pick it back up. First day in pads, certainly wasn't going to go in 11-11, starts to get acclimated with the pads, goes into individuals. But Tillman brings that thing that nobody else has. It's the size thing of that wide receiver. And he's working him early on the underneath routes. And again, similar to what the Njoku touchdown route was. But once people starting to bite on the underneath stuff, you just send them. And that's what they got with Cedric Tillman today. So it's been nice to see the way the offense has performed to this point. Of course, we're not going to get no indication right now on the running game. You really can't pick that up in any type of training camp type of stuff. You really can't pick it up in the preseason games either, because the top shelf talent that's most likely to be participating in the regular season is not going to be involved. So there's a lot going on here right now. But yeah, I think for the most part, it's looked pretty good, and I think it's looked better than expected, at least as far as certainly I'm concerned.
Yeah, the thing that the Tillman touchdown thing screamed to me is, that's a matchup he liked, and they leaked him out. You're going to see that a lot. They're going to find, all right, when we get this guy on Tillman, or this guy on Jeudy, or this guy on Moore, we're going to take a shot. And they did it with Tillman there, and you see the results. That's when I think of Deshaun Watson in Houston with the Texans, that's what I think of.
No question about it. And, he's always been a guy that's kind of gotten everybody involved. And so that's, certainly the strength to any quarterback. I made a mention on a show that I'm going to have out here in a minute but you go back to some of the most important parts of, NFL games. It's not necessarily the quarterback hitting his top target. Because when the money's on the line, nobody's foolish. Everybody in the building knows, all right, well, so-and-so's trying to go to him here. So as a quarterback, you've got to start to make sure that you've developed these relationships, which start now in late July and certainly in early August. that when you get into a money situation, a pressure situation, that most likely your top option, your most favorite option, your most successful option, ideally is going to be taken away. So most likely it's going to be option 2, it's going to be option 3, it's going to be option 4. The more balls the Elijah Moores of the world, the Cedric Tillmans of the world can catch now in July and August certainly leads up to the opportunity for them having meaningful balls thrown their way come September, October, and November.
So this Mary Kay Cabot tweets this out. Tony Fields in a walking boot, right foot. JOK not in pads today, apparently just resting, full padded practice. Obviously, JOK not concerning. Anybody in a walking boot, a little bit concerning because that's you certainly want a guy like Fields. Fields is a guy that has been banged up pretty much his entire career. You just want him to be healthy.
Well, you're in this odd position here with the Browns. It's probably only going to be 5 linebackers that maybe make this team. You know JOK is going to make this team. We know Jordan Hicks is going to make this team. And then you maybe get to about 4 guys who are essentially maybe competing for 3 spots. And that certainly would be Tony Fields. It would be Devin Bush. It would certainly be Mahmoud Diabate and the rookie Bookie Watson. You think Tony Fields, who probably has the most experience, at least within the Browns, and certainly playing for Jim Schwartz last year, he would probably have the inside track to spot number 3. If this lingers, I'm not saying it's maybe going to cost him his roster spot, but maybe there's a chance he, has to go on maybe a short-term IR type of thing or something. But it's not the best thing for Tony Fields, for right now. Tony's been a guy who's been able to contribute in defense, in special teams. And as the years have gone on, when there was injuries to Anthony Walker or injuries to Sonny Takitaki, that is when Tony Fields kind of found his opportunity to get on the field a little bit more. Now he's in a position where he might be leaving the field for a little bit and sadly maybe creating the opportunities for other guys. And then, certainly for Devin Bush, a guy trying to resurrect his career. Bookie Watson trying to make a name for himself. Mahmoud Diabate played really well for this team last year on special teams. And if everybody remembers, he was really good in base defense last year. So it wouldn't be surprising if, Diabate was a guy that found his, a path to significant playing time. But it hurts Tony Fields in the respect that you have probably 4 guys competing for 3 open final 53, linebacking spots on this roster. So hopefully for Tony, it's not that big of a deal. It's not that long. And it is, it's getting kind of early late, so to speak, because the Browns do play their first preseason game in about 9 days.
All right, so one of the notable free agents the Browns signed was linebacker Jordan Hicks. Played for Schwartz in Philadelphia. Hicks talked about his role with the Browns and being back in Jim Schwartz's defense.
It's been good. I know what to expect, right, and what Jim's looking for. But at the same time, a lot of this defense since the last time I was in it has evolved. So there's been some learning curves and some understanding, but a lot of that was done in OTAs and minicamp. So, we came, we hit the ground running, didn't have to install anything, just took off.
Jordan, lessons even more big picture. How do you view your role with this team?
Yeah.
Coming in as a new guy, but a 10-year vet.
Yeah. Obviously got to add leadership. I obviously in my linebacker room got to continue to grow and I'm here. I think what I embrace is the ability to share my story, the ability to, spread knowledge to some of the young guys who are dealing with, the pressures of the NFL and not understanding, necessarily what to expect in a 17, 18-game season, right? So, just got to, share my experience, push my leadership, both on offense and on defense.
And it's kind of interesting, Jeff. The Browns have been really good at as of late, last couple of years, finding guys. You listen to him talk, and you can see, all right, yeah, that's a guy you want JOK to hang around with. You want Tony Fields to hang. You want Bookie Watson to go pick his brain.
Well, the first thing you see when I see when I look at that is you take that tank top off him and maybe you switch it to a T-shirt or maybe a polo shirt. You get a guy who's probably, you can see what the next phase of Jordan Hicks's career is probably going to be. He's going to remain involved with the game, most likely going to be a coach in somehow, some way, at what capacity, what level. We'll see the way that works out. You see a guy who truly gets it, and it's not just, going out there and, we've had the Jadeveon Clowneys of the world here who didn't give a crap about anything else other than their playing time and their own personal success. But you see, and who certainly, chose not to lead by any way whatsoever and led negatively by just the way he acted and conducted himself. But, you're a player in this league and you kind of got to understand, Yeah, you get paid, but you want to be successful. And look, I mean, you can be the greatest player in whatever sport you are, but you're probably only going to be as good as the team around you. So there comes a time where you have to mature and, choose to maybe give back. And if you have information or you have tendencies or you have tips that can help the players around you get better and your team get better. And maybe one day it'll probably cost you your spot because, money, player improved, you got older, all that type of stuff that goes into it. But Jordan seems to be like a pretty selfless guy. And he's been all over the NFL. He's played for some bad teams in Arizona. He's played for some good teams in Minnesota. He certainly played for some good teams in Philadelphia. He gets what the league is about. 32 years old, he understands that maybe his job is to be here. And, he may be the guy who maybe is, this elder statesman of the room and the one that everybody looks up to, but probably understands at this point in time that Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is probably the better player. That doesn't mean Jordan Hicks is still a quality player. Over 100 tackles, I believe it's 4 or 5 seasons in a row. The guy just truly understands how to play the position. But you need more players like this, the Shelby Harrises of the world. Certainly him, McLeod, who has come in here and embraced the fact, that he just wants to close out his career and be on a good football team. And it doesn't surprise you that some of these players, whether it's a McLeod, whether it's a Hicks, certainly have that relationship with Jim Schwartz. And like, we heard Hicks say himself, there's some of this stuff that for him, it was just so easy that it was like, okay, I already know this part. Okay, is anybody else not up to speed? Okay, then let's get to the next part, the most crucial part. And, start to get the development and the learning going further and further into the playbook.
All right. Browns also made a roster move. They signed Caleb Johnson and they placed Charlie Thomas III on reserved injured. So, again, guy that in here might be battling for a spot on the practice squad, that kind of thing.
Well, Charlie Thomas was the guy that was with this team the entire year last year on the practice squad, was an impressive player in the summer last year. If anybody remembers the Hall of Fame game, he was the one that hit the Jets so hard. He ended up knocking the ball 15 yards that ended up, because the fumble ball was hit so hard, it ended up going out of bounds, almost traveled 15 yards. He was an athletic freak coming out. Kind of was a player that was kind of new to what a traditional NFL linebacker position was. We'll see exactly what it is, and maybe he can come back because he was a guy that could have quietly maybe contended for a roster spot in this linebacker room. I know there's a lot of people that felt maybe the way and the changes in the special teams could have aided Charlie Thomas to be a guy that could have played here. But like I said, look, next week you're playing a football game. We're pretty sure Jordan Hicks, JOK probably aren't playing in that game. Looks like now that Tony Fields isn't as well. You're just going to have some bodies that get you through that game. Maybe it doesn't crack open a door for Caleb Johnson to make the 53, but, put something on tape, play well, obviously get some production for yourself. Maybe it leads to a practice squad spot. Maybe it leads to somebody else who's going to deal with linebacker injuries and needs a player. But, you need a couple of bodies. This time of year, you start to, once you get the pads get on, the injuries pick up a little bit. But the other thing is the teams are a little bit more cautious. So just as, if it was the regular season, something might cost you a day or two. They might give it a couple extra here just because they don't want you to come right back and then have to go back right out. So, Caleb Johnson in and probably going to be a guy who's going to take a ton of reps, next Saturday.
Jeff Lloyd and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we continue talking Browns. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Cash, moolah, greenback, toast, Skrilla, chips, bread and mold, cheddar, butter, lewd and scratch. Find the letters, make a match. Lettuce, gravy, game on the back for $30. That's a wrap. There's many words for cash, no doubt, but there's only one $30 cash word. Check it out. Cash word from Ohio Lottery. It's $30 show. Cash word, it's fun to go with millions in prizes, don't you know?
We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. This is from the Mina Kimes Show. Mina Kimes, Chris Long on the 2024 Browns. They put the Browns in the flawed but feisty tier of teams for 2024.
The Browns, outside of the quarterback, have arguably the best roster in the entire NFL.
Here's what I have, because you sent me initially, if a couple things go right, the Browns were in there, and I'm glad you changed it because I have written down, if only one thing goes right. It's literally if this guy remembers how to play
Flawed
football.
by feisty is a football assessment, by the way.
Yeah.
Just talking about the team. But the team is awesome, dude. The team is so good.
That roster is incredible.
So good.
It's incredible. I like the coach.
Yeah, me too.
So the Browns, I would put, honestly, the Browns and the Jets to me are very different, but kind of the same in their potential, in my opinion.
Arguably the two best defenses in the NFL.
Jeff, I think we've talked about this. What people that are rating Watson so low aren't realizing is he hasn't been able to string games together. You know, he missed the first 11. So by the time he comes back in week 12, everybody else is in midseason form, and he hadn't played in 2 years. Then last year it was play a game, miss 3, play a game, miss a couple, there's no sense of rhythm. He can't get into any rhythm.
He is 8-4 as this team's starter, and as both of them just said, he may have one of the best defenses in the NFL. And again, I see the Cincinnati Bengals on top of it, the Browns. The Cincinnati Bengals defense is terrible. The most important player on the Cincinnati Bengals defense is gone. Their linebackers, we have watched time and time again. We've watched Wyatt Teller, Joel Bitonio either drop them into the ground on first contact, or we've watched them drive them 15 yards down the field. Joe, I just don't get it. If we are basing these things and we are doing these rankings, it better be on every facet of every team. And, you know, if flawed but feisty, okay, but he went 8-4 last year. Do we know that Joe Burrow is 100% healthy? Their defense has gotten worse. You see some of these rankings, and it's all just based on one thing and one thing only. Meanwhile, they try to say it's based on the whole team. That's the part I have. If it's based on the whole team, there's a lot of teams who have great defense and would like to replace their quarterback. Carolina would prefer to have Deshaun Watson as their quarterback right now than Young. You don't know what you truly have in that guy yet. The fact is, he was 8-4, and he was cooking pretty well. And the last we saw him was going to basically be his statement game as the franchise quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. And I will say it again. I will say it today, tomorrow, next week. The Cleveland Browns would have went just as far last year, if not further, with Deshaun Watson as their quarterback than they did with Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco made a couple of throws that got everybody up in awes, but he was very flawed as far as the amount of times he was turning the football over. And if it was Deshaun Watson that was turning the football over at the rate that Joe Flacco was, he wouldn't have even been on that list. Nor would the Browns.
All right, so this is from Pro Football Network, predicting every team's first-time Pro Bowler. They go with Martin Emerson. Raised his game to another level by picking off 4 passes in 2023, 3 of which got snatched on first downs. Furthermore, opposing quarterbacks only completed 46.8% of their passes when throwing it in his direction. Per True Media, Emerson allowed a completion percentage of under 3.4% in both post and corner routes. That is ridiculous. Yeah, I could certainly see Martin Emerson being a Pro Bowl corner. That I can see that, and if not this year, I expect it next.
Martin Emerson's rookie year, there was, I have friends that are, still a couple of friends that with the Philadelphia Eagles that I've known for a long time. And Philadelphia came out and they were joining practices with the Eagles. And, I was getting messages right away. Brown stole this guy. And I think one of the things that hurt Martin Emerson's draft position was athletic testing. And, this happens at times. It certainly happens. It will never, not be an issue in the NFL. But the thing is what Martin Emerson was missing as far as, what would be considered top shelf athleticism. He had, plus size. He had plus length. And the thing is, are you comfortable within who you are? Do you know what your deficiencies are? Do you know what your positives are? And I think that's what we really got to see from Martin Emerson as a freshman. And then last year, it got to the point where the Browns were playing so much, one-on-one, that teams had no choice. They truly had to, all right, well, I don't want to throw his way, but I have no choice because Denzel's covering him. Greg knows, who looks less locked up right now? And then once Martin Emerson Jr. was starting to create turnovers as well, we had that interception in Seattle where he just ran the route, and it was just a beautifully job by him. I would probably think, and look, in the grand scheme of things, do Pro Bowls mean a hill of beans? No, they don't to me. I don't want any of my players going to the Pro Bowl because I'd rather them be busy the next week. But I think it's really starting to come league attention, national attention, that the Browns have 3 really good cornerbacks, and they're going to have a huge decision to make at the end of 2025. But Martin Emerson Jr. is probably reaching lockdown status. And, what makes him, I think, so valued is the fact that he does bring a little bit plus size. They all love Denzel. We all know what Denzel can do, but Martin Emerson's just even bigger and with a longer wingspan.
Yeah, he's got the bully mindset too. He's going to physical you, and he knows he's stronger than you, and he kind of likes that. And that's, what that describes an all-pro corner. That I like that. I want that in my cornerback without question. This is from the 33rdteam.com, so those are former NFL executives, personnel type guys, ranking the top 10 NFL coordinators entering the 2024 season. Number 1, they got Steve Spagnuolo, DC of the Chiefs. Number 2, Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator of the Lions. Number 3, they have Jim Schwartz. His 2023 Browns defense, terrific example of how units can shape a season. Browns allowed the fewest yards in the league and ranked first as a passing defense. Advanced stats show the unit that was elite, lining up limited yardage after the catch and reaching the quarterback despite being in the middle of the pack with blitzes. Number 8, they have Ken Dorsey. With the Browns under Kevin Stefanski, balance shouldn't be an issue. Dorsey's ability to blend high-efficiency looks with chunk plays will complement Cleveland's strength of melding its scheme to their quarterback's talents. Dorsey and Stefanski are skilled at mixing zone and gap runs. And this makes it an exciting partnership. Tell you what, the part there that I like is melding scheme to their quarterback's talents. If Dorsey is able to help the Browns get there and Deshaun Watson look like Deshaun Watson, his stay probably will be very short in Cleveland, and that's a good thing for him.
Well, I mean, maybe not, because look, it's probably going to have to be more than 1 year, because you're talking about a guy that was essentially
fired.
Look, and whatever anybody wants to say, the Bills wanted to try to preserve Josh Allen. So therefore, the offensive coordinator was Ken Dorsey, basically said, let's try to preserve Josh Allen, and we're not going to basically let the genie out of the lamp unless it's certain weeks that we need him to, or it's late December and January. Well, when they were losing a couple of games that they shouldn't have lost, everybody was like, well, why isn't Josh Allen going out there being Josh Allen? Well, it's got to be the offense coordinator. So I doubt Ken Dorsey just said, in his position, I'm going to be the one that's just going to say what we're going to do. But, you get into that. So this will be his first year as being an offense coordinator with the Cleveland Browns. But the thing that could make it look very appealing is here's a guy that did have a tremendous amount of success with Josh Allen. Here is a guy who has had a tremendous amount of success now with Deshaun Watson if all things go right. That could be the thing. Or maybe Ken Dorsey sticks around and we finally get to that time where Kevin Stefanski says, maybe I am comfortable enough to basically just be the CEO of this team and let somebody else kind of truly run my offense. A long way to go, certainly before there. But, for Ken Dorsey, it was kind of a surprise to see his name on this list, just knowing what he went through last year. But, if your name was attached with Josh Allen for a decent amount of time, that probably means you should be in good standing as far as, what your thoughts are as far as, trying to get yards and get touchdowns.
Yeah, and the one thing is, it'll be a high-profile year for Deshaun Watson. If he has success, and Deshaun Watson will say, oh, yeah, it's Coach Dorsey, because he was saying about Van Pelt. That'll be there's a lot of things that could happen good for Ken Dorsey if this offense takes off the way I think it might. Jeff Lloyd and I are going to step aside.
Oh, there's no question.
Jeff Lloyd and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. We'll hear from Jordan Hicks coming back. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. Jordan Hicks, linebacker for the Browns, talked about plan behind this Browns defensive line, as well as some of the challenges with training camp not having full hitting contact all the time.
It always makes it so much easier if you got a disruptive defensive line. So, I'm excited. I can't wait for everybody to get healthy and just get out there and feel what it's going to feel like. We are very deep on the line, and so it's exciting. It's been a while since It's been a while since I've had a defensive line that just attacks and doesn't play back in the blocks. Like this scheme has had a lot of success, and obviously the success we're trying to build off of from last year.
As a defender, it's your job to hit people.
Right. I just think you have to maximize every rep, right? Coach wants to lay off and take care of our bodies so that we can have that longevity, but at the same time, right, you've got to, if you're tracking a ball, for me personally, if I'm tracking a ball inside out, I got to stay inside out, and finish in a position that would simulate tackling.
Yeah, Jeff, can you imagine, again, he's played with some decent defenses, but he knows the defensive line is going to create some chaos, and he's going to have the opportunity to clean things up and make 100 tackles. He might get 140 this year.
Well, you got to keep in mind, he's already played for the man. He's already played within the scheme, and he has seen what the best of a Jim Schwartz defense looks like in his time with the Philadelphia Eagles. So, he can look right away, and he can kind of look in front of him and say, all right, well, is this getting done to Jim Schwartz's satisfaction? Is this getting done to Jim Schwartz's expectation? And certainly has a relationship with Dalvin Tomlinson as well. So he can kind of see it, and he knows what the vision is. He knows what the expectation is, which is probably what made Cleveland as attractive as it was for him to come here. Certainly just had to watch some of the tape last year and just watching, what Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah was able to do last year. He's not a dummy. I mean, you try to find a situation that is good for you. And a lot of times a situation that is good for you is a situation you have familiarity with. And so basically it's, hey, maybe that is pretty much a recreation of what was going on over there in Philly, which I had so much success with, which I, enjoyed playing in so much. So, nobody's going to fool, Jordan Hicks as far as, how this Browns defense is playing, because he knows it so well. He knows what the talent should be doing. He knows the type of talent that should be in the scheme for the scheme to, excel. So, Jordan Hicks, and again, I know we've talked about this before, but for me, it was, definitely one of the quietest, but could have a really, really big bang of a return for this Cleveland Browns defense, because now you just don't have one great linebacker. You have two great linebackers.
Yeah, I'm with you. I liked the signing a lot. I found this one interesting. This is from Jason from Over the Cap, tweeting this out. Total APYs for the top 5 players on a team. So that's the average that they're getting paid per year. Dolphins had the top at 153.5, so that's top 5. Eagles second, Lions third, Packers fourth. Jaguars, Ravens, Chiefs all ahead of the Browns. Browns at 8, just ahead of the Bengals. So we know the Browns have a lot of higher-end contracts, but when you take a look at the top 5, they're, in the middle third, really.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of this comes down to, look, how did your first-round picks work out? Myles Garrett, extended. Denzel Ward, extended. We all know the amount of money that is, being distributed to to Deshaun Watson. So that's where it comes down to. And look, you got to, you build, and hopefully the players you acquire are going to be players who are going to have longevity and stability. You draft a guy number 1 overall, your expectation should be that one day this man will be the highest paid player at his position. And at one point, Myles was. It's interesting there, but I mean, also with the way that list kind of works, though, is, yeah, those are all the names there, but there's going to be a lot of games in the NFL, a lot of games in the NFL playoffs where those 5 players that, basically combine for that top amount of cap maybe won't matter. Like one of the most important players, in the playoffs last year for the Kansas City Chiefs was the running back Pacheco. And we know he is not one of the 5 players on that list for the Kansas City Chiefs. So, I mean, you try to find your core players and you try to establish them. But you got to keep in mind, yes, monetarily, they are a large amount of what you pay a team. But then in the the hindsight and the retrospect of it all is 48 players combined are just as important as those 5.
So this is from ESPN, Browns X Factor for 2024. They go to Deshaun Watson. If Watson can somehow regain the form he had when he played in Houston, this team with an otherwise strong roster is a Super Bowl contender. If he plays like he has as a Brown, then it's not. He's 42 QBR over 2 seasons. Again, I'm not I'm not as concerned about the stats as I am the health of Deshaun Watson. I keep saying it, and people are probably sick of me saying it. If he's on the field for 15, 16, 17 games, I think the Browns are going to be in it and have a really good chance at winning the AFC North. That would be their first division championship since 1989. And I covered that team.
I have no question about it. I don't think the Baltimore Ravens are as good as they were last year. I see. Everybody in the world knows I don't think the Cincinnati Bengals are nearly as good as they are last year. And, Pittsburgh Steelers, you have two quarterbacks. That's great. We all know what the story about two quarterbacks is, and how that works out for your team. I think the Cleveland Browns should not lose the AFC North this year. And yes, I mean, look, nobody's hiding it. It's no great mystery. Everybody knows the 2024 Cleveland Browns, their success is contingent. And I agree with you. It's not contingent necessarily on the play, because if I think he plays 16 or 17, you're going to see what you think the expectation still is for Deshaun Watson. He is going to be right around 4,000 yards. He's not going to throw for 5,000. This team doesn't need him to throw for 5,000 yards. He doesn't need to compete statistically with Pat Mahomes or Josh Allen. He does not need to do those things. But if he goes out there and he can play even, a couple of percentage points of the player he was in his last full season with the Houston Texans, the Cleveland Browns will easily win the AFC North. Their defense, other spots on their team are just better and deeper than their counterparts in the North.
All right, so new offensive line coach Andy Dickerson was asked how he has the offensive line blocking for a quarterback like Deshaun Watson, and he had a simple answer.
A run-around quarterback. I got to see if okay, yeah. You block the guy until they throw the ball. Like, that's the intent, right? Okay, we have our calls, we have the protection. And again, if there's some movement or pocket movement or whatever it is, then you have to stay connected and you have to strain. Like, you have the ugly strain is what we like to talk about. It's that finish, that effort that, O-linemen are inherently built with. But again, those plays that may take a little more time have a potential to be explosive. So when you have a dynamic quarterback and athlete such as Deshaun, you're going to block and strain. So that's another great thing about being in sometimes when the weather's a little hot or something, just to continue to press yourself, to work and strain. You're coaching O-line, hey, you got a 3 technique. Okay, well, what's he going to do after that? Well, go, you got to set the guy, you got to block the guy, and you got to stay connected so the ball's gone. That's our challenge.
Jeff, I absolutely loved the answer.
Well, I mean, this is the toughest spot because you got to keep in mind two of his most important pieces on offensive line. Jedrick Wills, Jack Conklin are not doing much of anything at this point. We keep hearing that they should be ready to go week 1. So it's truly hard and one of the most difficult things to evaluate in what we are given right now in camp is offensive line play. You just don't see enough. There's always an early whistle because you're trying to make for so much protection and trying to save guys. But you kind of see what Andy Dickerson's all about. And I think the thing I kind of like is Bill Callahan was just kind of so buttoned down because he knew he was good. He knew his theory worked. He knew he would get the best out of whatever you gave him because he had the track record to prove it. Andy Dickerson is a new experience for him. Obviously, he's breaking into some new pieces with a guy like Zach Zinter, but also trying to, bide his time till he gets, Conklin and Wills back. So, this is the tough part because we don't, it's going to be really difficult to evaluate something that we can't see a lot of. And that's kind of the case in the way it works here with offensive line play, as far as training camp. And then once we get to games, it's going to be a question of who's actually playing in them.
Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast, and I'm going to step aside, take one more time out, other side of the break. Some NFL power rankings, this one from Fox Sports. Sports4CLE. I'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE with Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. This one's from Fox Sports. NFL Power Rankings entering the preseason. They go Chiefs 1, 49ers 2, Lions 3, Eagles 4, Texans 5. I think that's a little high, but that's all right. Packers 6. They have the Bengals and Ravens 7 and 8, and the Bills 9 ahead of the Browns 10. Roster is one of the very best in the NFL. It'll be even better if Nick Chubb can get back to his old self after last year's injury. If this team reaches playoffs, starting 5 quarterbacks, imagine how good it can be with Pro Bowl caliber quarterback play. Jeff, again, people are probably getting sick of me saying this. They don't need Pro Bowl caliber quarterback play. They need competent quarterback play. And again, I'm with you. I don't expect Deshaun Watson to throw for 5,000 yards. He doesn't need to. He needs to, when he gets the ball in the fourth quarter, to be able to score like he did against the Ravens last year with a shoulder that had a broken bone in it and a high ankle sprain.
Well, this list now, not only are the Cincinnati Bengals ahead of the Cleveland Browns, they're ahead of the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah.
The Baltimore Ravens have been the standard in the AFC North for damn near a decade. But I just, look, you can find this thing, and look, a lot of this stuff and why are these things put out is because they're put out for reaction. So which, the fact that we are actually going to get NFL football again tonight, I could not be more thankful for. Because again, look, this stuff is done for reaction. But if you want to tell me that the Cincinnati Bengals are a better team than the Cleveland Browns, well, when's been the proof? Because even if you want to shave everything out, what the Bengals did a couple of years ago, go to a Super Bowl, their Achilles heel right now is, and always has been during the Joe Burrow era, has been the Cleveland Browns. Look, it's going to be a battle within the North, and it is. And it's going to be what team, because I think the Browns, look, if you want to say the Browns maybe didn't get overall better, but they're running back, almost the same thing, but it's going to come down to Watson. Okay, well then are all the things that are missing as far as deficiencies for the Cincinnati Bengals, are they going to hit on all those things? I have a hard time believing that. The Baltimore Ravens, are they going to hit on the fact that they lost the defensive coordinator? They lost prominent defensive players, and they don't necessarily have those guys or had the ability or money to replace things they lost. Not sure that's going to happen either. But the one thing that this does tell you, and it is kind of rare, is that there are 3 teams from the AFC North that seem to show up consistently in power rankings, and that hasn't happened in a very, very long time.
Yeah, and it is, health and your record in the division are going to be 2 things.
Because normally it would be Pittsburgh, Baltimore, scroll down to the 20s and find where people think Cincinnati and Cleveland are going to finish this year.
Yeah, but again, it may be health. If you can, the team that stays the healthiest may be the one that survives the AFC North.
Because the thing is, and this is just real quick, is everybody just assumes that Deshaun Watson won't play well if he plays 16 or 17 games, which I don't understand why. Because any other time in his career he's played 16 or 17 games, he's been good, and he's been damn good. Yeah. So if he gets to 16 or 17 games, there's probably going to be a lot of folks end up beating Grump.
Yeah, and I'm with you. And the other thing is people want to say, he's injury prone. Joe Burrow has finished 2 of 4 seasons on the injured list. Lamar Jackson finally made it through a season last year and was really, really good. He was hurt at the end of the last couple of years. So it's NFL football. Quarterbacks get hurt. That's kind of it comes with the territory. That's why they make hundreds of millions of dollars. Andy Dickerson talked about the unique dynamic that he has in this Browns offensive line room.
You make it a football conversation. So again, I'm watching film, you might say something, coach something up, and then you got Joel Bitonio saying something. You look over, Wyatt Teller's talking to Javion, you got DeJuan talking to somebody. So the fact that you can coach and talk to everybody, and I love when those side conversations are going on because these guys are all football. They're talking a little tip from Wyatt, who's played for a bunch of years, can help at Javion. The same thing with when Joel's talking to Zach, those little tidbits of nuggets that you only get from playing that experience. So, and then the challenge of, hey, no details too small for a rookie. And again, Joel Bitonio, one of the first things, he's like, hey, I want to be coached. So you have those veteran guys, who Ethan Posick, who are always asking, trying to get feedback.
kind of interesting that, you know, he's a younger coach. He's been around. And he coached with Bill Callahan. He understands, hey, the veterans coaching these guys, that's great. They're taking ownership of it.
Well, there's no other room really in football where like those type of conversations go on like to do with the offensive line. Because, you know, and look, how many times have we seen mic'd up players and, you know, Wyatt, hey, that's great. Somebody scored a touchdown. But did you see me drive the guy 17 yards down the field? Because it's like it's almost underappreciated thing that goes on within the NFL is offensive line play. So when you think it's underappreciated by everybody, where do the really good conversations probably happen? With the guys who would be able to appreciate it and understand it. But look, you have some immense talent in that room. You have probably three former All-Pros between Jack, between Joel, between Wyatt. Ethan Posick, you know, was a guy that career wasn't going so well, but now is here and really has picked back up his career. You know, you have a guy like Zach Zinter, who was a fantastic offensive lineman last year, J.V. Cohen, who's got a whole bunch of talent, but wasn't really that athletic. That's why he ended up being an undrafted free agent. But conversations like that between players and really getting into the nuances and all of it, it's really offensive line where those rooms take place. Skill guys, oh, I cooked the guy. This is what I did. Bang, bang, boom. Because, you know, you can't share so much because, you know, oh, well, I'm 6'4", I run a 4.3. You're 5'10", you're quicker than you are fast. Offensive line, we're all 6'4", 320, and we're trying to just move people, creating space for everybody else. It's a different type of bond. It's a different type of brotherhood. And we talked about this when Bill Callahan left. Maybe this was the thing they needed because that group maybe had been together with Bill too long. And, you know, granted, maybe nobody wanted it, but it had to happen because it was just an opportunity Bill couldn't turn down. But it wasn't necessarily going to be a bad thing for the Cleveland Browns to kind of get a change in that room, just to change the way things are done. You know, so maybe people were, not that they were, but, you know, it's a new day. It's a new era. And, you know, guys embracing it. And as you heard him say, Joe Batonio, hey, I want to be coached.
Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jeff.
All the best, Dave. It's here and it's wonderful.
Jeff Lloyd, make sure you check him out. Always really good stuff, the Locked On Browns podcast. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan. He's also a writer for Cleveland Browns on SI. Straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Cash, moolah, greenbacks, toast, Skrilla, chips, bread and mold, cheddar, butter, lute and scratch, find the letters, make a match, lettuce, gravy, game on the back for $30. That's a wrap. There's many words for cash, no doubt, but there's only one $30 cash word. Check it out. Cash word from Ohio Lottery. It's $30, yo. Cash word, it's fun to go with millions of prizes, don't you know?
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. This is from an article written by Spencer German for the Browns on SI. 4 burning questions for the Browns. Is Amari Cooper, is this his last season? Is the first one. Number 2, Nick Chubb recently did a workout after practice. How'd it look? Is it a sign he will be ready for week 1? Excuse me. Number 3, is Kevin Stefanski calling the plays the right choice, or should he have passed the responsibility to Ken Dorsey? And 4, what's the biggest thing you've taken away from the first few days of training camp? Let's welcome in the author of that article, Spencer German, 92.3 The Fan, as well as Cleveland Browns on Sports Illustrated. Let's start with that last one. Biggest takeaway, Spencer, from the first few days of training camp?
Yeah, Dave, appreciate you guys having me on as always. And yeah, the first couple of days I had a chance to be out there at the Greenbrier. I think one of the biggest things that stood out to me was just the nuances that are being added to this offense with Ken Dorsey. And I know Kevin Stefanski made the announcement while we were there that he's going to be calling the plays. But all the things we've talked about, the motion pre-snap with players, whether it's a receiver motion outside to inside or across the formation. There was a couple times where they had multiple tight ends on one side of the formation. They moved to the opposite side of the formation. I think that's on full display. And just, how they're planning on utilizing more like downfield stuff and RPOs. We started to see a little bit of that. I know things have opened up a little bit more in the more recent days as they put the pads on. But I think that's the biggest thing that stood out to me those first couple of days down there, which was obviously encouraging and something that Browns fans are excited about with this group this year.
Play calling. Kevin Stefanski announced it right out of the gate because he got sick and tired of the question. What are your thoughts just of him calling the plays?
I think it's the right move. It's always tough because I understand where maybe some fans wanted something different, a fresh perspective on things. But I also feel like as you look back, and I understand maybe, last year in particular, I know Kevin Stefanski's offense wasn't the most highly rated offense in football because of all the turnover they had at the quarterback position. But the fact that, he kind of willed that team through his play calling, through his coaching to get to the playoffs and have the success that they did is a testament to him as a play caller. And frankly, he's a 2-time coach of the year who got this job because of the respect that he has as a play caller in this league. So I think it was the right choice. I mean, I don't know that there was even necessarily a wrong choice here. I don't think if he had given it up to Dorsey, we needed to be up in arms about that. But I do like the idea of Stefanski kind of keeping some continuity with that. And I think it's kind of a testament also because I think the biggest thing you worry about with that is, can these coaches handle play calling on Sundays? And that's why I think some guys give it up. We saw Nick Sirianni do that recently with the Eagles, where he passed the play calling off. And with Stefanski, I think given, his resume speaks for itself. The success this franchise has had in the first 4 years of him being here speaks for itself. I think he's proven that he can handle, making up a game plan each week and then executing it on Sundays with him kind of being the guy pulling the string. So I was okay with it. I'm good with it.
Yeah, I was fine either way. And the one thing as I was reading that, it would be much easier for him to, if he's calling plays and things, aren't going the way he wants to, it's much easier for him to say, all right, I'm going to turn it over to Ken Dorsey. If he gives it to Ken Dorsey and they turn it back over to Kevin Stefanski, that's a little more dicey. So I understand why he would start out doing that. Nick Chubb workout, week 1, man, I'd love it, but that seems still a little optimistic. We'll leave it at optimistic.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard because whether you're covering this team, whether you follow this team as a fan, anytime you see a Nick Chubb update, whether it's him, squatting 540 pounds in a video that went viral, or doing that post-practice workout that I had a chance to be there for, which, listen, for being 9 months removed from, I guess almost 10 months removed from that injury, and him doing that was pretty impressive. He was doing some cutting drills as well as some more lateral stuff, which was cool to see. And so I understand why people want to get excited. It's hard not to get excited when you see that because it's Nick Chubb, and we know how much he's adored in this franchise and from the fan base. So yeah, is it a sign he's going to be ready for week 1? I've been writing and saying for several weeks now, I don't think he's going to play week 1. And I think a lot of it comes down to maybe Nick Chubb gets to week 1 and he wants to play and he thinks hey, I'm 80%, which is good enough, or 90%. But I think this organization is just going to play it safe with them. I don't think they're going to risk anything. I think they showed you by bolstering the running back room the way they did this offseason. You add Deontay Foreman, you add Naheem Hines, you got Pierre Strong coming back, you still got Jerome Ford. Like, I think them doing that was a testament to, hey, we're gonna let Nick Chubb kind of slow play this, and we'll get him back out there when he's fully healthy. And the game he finally returns, you can imagine, is going to be a pretty emotional one for fans at Cleveland Browns Stadium.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the other thing is, I think they want him later in the year as opposed to earlier. Because
agreed.
Backloaded schedule. So I'm with you. Cooper, I can't imagine if Cooper goes out and plays the way he has in his time here, that they don't find a way to keep him around somehow, some way.
So my one struggle with the Cooper situation, Dave, is just that Andrew Berry has been so good about paying their players, especially guys that they feel are important to the culture and all that. And so the fact that they didn't get an extension done now, and there was levers they could have pulled. I mean, if they really needed to, they could have, restructured Deshaun's deal again and pushed some money down and created some space for Cooper. They could have just backloaded the deal, which is something they tend to do. So I just felt like if they really, really wanted to pay him, they would have figured and extended him. They would have found a way to do it now. So I'm curious about that one, because I agree with you, like his importance, and if he has another good season, it's going to be hard to let him walk. But I wonder if him being on the other side of 30 now is the thing that is maybe, I don't want to say scaring them, but is maybe like the red flag for them, where they're like, well, we'd rather invest in some young players. And I think they kind of showed you that this offseason too, when they made the trade for Jerry Jeudy, and immediately a week later, they're giving him an extension. So yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm kind of slow playing it in terms of whether or not I think they're going to re-sign him or not. But I think going into the season, I'm kind of operating under the premise that this might legitimately be his last year here in Cleveland.
Yeah, it very well may be. And again, though, if he's out and producing, I could see them extending him a year once the season gets going. The question is going to be, is Amari Cooper going to bet on himself and thinking that he can get $30+ million for 1 or 2 years somewhere else? I mean, the wide receiver market is foolish right now as far as the money that's being. We went into the wrong business. We should have been wide receivers.
Wide receivers are quarterbacks. Yeah, you're right. No, that's a good point. Like, the market's going to dictate everything. If he has another good season, puts up 1,000 yards again, we already know he's the first receiver in franchise history to have back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. If he does it a third time, on one hand, the Browns are going to be hard-pressed to let him walk. On the other hand, he might be hard-pressed to re-sign and maybe take a hometown discount or something if he thinks he can get bigger money even over like 2 years somewhere else. So it's a good point by you, and the money will kind of dictate that. But that'll be a storyline we'll be following throughout the entire season for sure.
So this one's from Pro Football Network. It's a player who could be traded from every NFL team this year. They say Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Browns signed 2 experienced backup quarterbacks, Jameis Winston, Tyler Huntley. DTR is still 3 years remaining on his rookie contract, and another team could find value in that, trading for an athletic quarterback. The one thing, Huntley's only 2 years older than DTR. DTR is 24, Huntley's 26. I had to look that up. I could see him being traded. If somebody offers them a decent draft pick and you have Huntley sitting there, I think you'd be, if I'm looking for a quarterback that I got to play, I'd probably rather have Tyler Huntley.
Yeah, I got to be honest, Dave. Like, there's not a ton of, notable position battles with this team during camp, as we know, because, spots 1 through 41, maybe 42 are all kind of settled, right? Like, we know what generally the starters are going to look like on this team. But when that's the case, you got to kind of look down the depth chart to find some things that might be interesting, or some battles that might get interesting. I think wide receiver has some. I think this quarterback room is one of the more fascinating stories as camp plays out. We know Deshaun is set in stone. Unless some team like loses a quarterback in the preseason and offers, the Browns like a Godfather deal to get Jameis Winston, I think Jameis Winston is probably safe. So you're kind of anticipating both those guys are going to be sticking around. Now, Andrew Berry talked a little bit the other day about how they generally like to keep 3 quarterbacks. So I think that's an interesting note for people to kind of hold on to, that they likely will try to keep 3 this year. even though they only kept 2, I know, last year. And one of those was DTR at the time. But it's the battle between Tyler Huntley and DTR is a fascinating thing over the next few weeks, because I think the piece you shared is right. Like, he could be on the chopping block. It could be Tyler Huntley who ends up on the chopping block in terms of a trade. We know last year Andrew Berry swung that deal with Josh Dobbs at the end of training camp and got a pick back in return. Does he try to do something similar this year? I think that could be on the table. So I'm definitely fascinated to watch that group play out, because they've spoken very highly of DTR, and I think they do view him as like a long-term potential backup for the franchise. But in the same breath, why'd you bring in Tyler Huntley if you don't think he has a chance to make this team and have be another solid backup option for you? So I'm going to be keeping my eye on that one for sure, because that is a scenario that could play out, whether it's Huntley or whether it's DTR. I think that piece is definitely onto something there.
Yeah, you're right. That'll be one of the ones that you'll want to watch during the preseason for sure. Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan and the Cleveland Browns on SI and I are going to take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll talk a little bit about Deshaun Watson. Sports4CLE. I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Cash, moolah, greenbacks, toast, Skrilla, chips, bread and mold, cheddar, butter, lute and scratch. Find the letters, make a match. Lettuce, gravy, game on the back for $30. That's a wrap. There's many words for cash, no doubt, but there's only one $30 cash word. Check it out. Cash word from Ohio Lottery. It's $30 show. Cash word, it's fun to go with millions in prizes, don't you know?
We continue talking Browns with Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan, as well as the Cleveland Browns on SI. Spencer, what do you think about Deshaun Watson? Do you think they're going to play him in the preseason? Would you play him in the preseason?
Whether or not they're going to play him, again, is a fascinating question. Because I do think on some level they want to kind of keep him in bubble wrap. But I think personally, and I don't usually like to make a big deal out of preseason games and guys getting reps, and I'm always in favor of just kind of protecting guys if you need to and whatever. Like Denzel Ward last year, remember in the last preseason game, they played him and he ends up with a concussion, and then we were worried about what that meant for the start of his season. So you just never know. But with Watson, I need to see something. I think that's where I'm at with it, is just we have yet to really see him be the quarterback he used to be. We all have questions about whether or not he can even still get back to being that guy he was in Houston. And, you got a new offense that's supposed to be catered to him. You're coming off the shoulder surgery. I just think it's a perfect storm for him to have to get some reps in live game speed, live game action, even though it's the preseason, just to kind of get himself kind of reacclimated and feeling good before the season starts. Because, last year, his direct quote was, it's going to be fireworks week 1, and he got off to a little bit of a slow start. It took him a couple weeks to really look like the guy that we were hoping he was going to be and that we thought he was going to be. And so, yeah, I'm done with the rust conversation. I'm done talking about that and being like, oh, well, he's coming back from the shoulder injury. It's week 1. Give him some time. I want him to be as ready as possible for the start of the season. So I would play him, and it would probably come in that second preseason game, which is usually like your dress rehearsal game. So we'll see if he plays next week in the first game. Maybe they give him like a quarter, and then they expand that to a half in the second game. But I definitely think he needs as many reps as he can get before the season starts to avoid having to deal with this whole conversation about rust and, getting reacclimated and all that again.
Yeah, I would, I don't know if I'd play him in the first preseason game. What I would do, he has to be tied to the starting offensive line, because I don't want,
sure.
I don't want, you don't want somebody missing a block and somebody getting hit from the blind side. I'd probably play him at least a couple of series, maybe even first quarter plus a series or 2 in that second one. But yeah, I'm with you. I fully, and here's where I'm at with this, and I've asked a number of people this. Until this shoulder injury, which by all accounts he's back from, it hadn't been, I can't come up with a guy that was a Pro Bowl quarterback who suddenly lost it and wasn't seriously injured. Nobody's been able, the closest anybody got, I had a PFF guy say, Well, Mark Bulger, and he said it was more from taking hits. So that's why I think he's back on the field. I think he's going to end up being pretty good. My question is, can he stay healthy enough?
Yeah, the health thing is always going to be a concern, especially when you have a quarterback who likes to run. I mean, I actually asked Deshaun back in, I think it was June or end of May during OTAs. I asked him point blank about like whether or not they're talking to him about ways he can protect himself better. And he gets a little defensive, I think, just in general, when people are kind of questioning him and the way he does things. But I think, his answer was basically just kind of rooted in, it's part of my game. I can't be afraid to take hits. And so it's not, there's a lot more RPO stuff in this offense. So you're going to see him doing even more of it. And he's got to just get down and slide and make sure he doesn't take the hits. But I think concerns I had about the shoulder injury, and there's still a little bit of doubt because we've never seen a football player.
Yep.
There's like, if you try to find examples of a football player experiencing this injury, there aren't many.
No,
but
you're right.
If any, you can't find any, especially a quarterback, nonetheless. But what he talked about, I remember back in April, was this is generally a pitcher injury, and generally the pitchers who have had this come back and they've been fine. And so I'm taking his word on that. I'm taking what science says on that. The doctor he worked with, Dr. Elatrosh, I know he's done surgeries on a ton of baseball players who had the same injury, and they've come back and been okay and been able to pitch. So that makes me feel better about that, because that was my big question for much of the offseason. But there still always is that little bit of doubt where it's like, well, what if he doesn't have it still? What if, he gets hurt again or he takes a hit on the shoulder? What happens? And unfortunately, we're not going to have answers to those questions until he really takes those first hits. But yeah, the health thing I think is the biggest concern at this point. If he can stay healthy, I mean, it's camp. I don't want to read too much into it, but he has looked pretty solid at the start of camp here in terms of his ability to throw the ball, still spin it. And we just have to hope that can translate now in preseason games if he plays, and obviously during the regular season.
Spencer German, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Spencer.
Always a pleasure, Dave. Happy to do it, and take care of yourself. Hope we get a chance to catch up soon.
Sounds good. Spencer German, make sure you check him out. 92.3 The Fan. He also writes for the Cleveland Browns on SI. Always really good stuff. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLA. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.